I mean, specifically for Causal Loop, I don't think we had any catastrophic occurrences of that, but
I'd say the
I don't think so,
desynchronous, the sync issues we had. Like, I was genuinely worried for a good while there.
Hey, and welcome to the CG Spectrum podcast. I'm Scot, Bayless, Director of Game Development here. We're an online animation, games, VFX, and digital art educator that gets you career ready. In this episode, we're chatting with two CG Spectrum alumni, two of the founders of Mirebound Interactive, Daniel Radschun and Kai Moosman. Daniel and Kai met while working as producers at Blizzard Entertainment, and in 2021 decided to start their own company. They enrolled at CG Spectrum to develop their skills, Daniel in game programming and Kai studying game design. They developed their game Causal Loop while at CGS and had a functioning prototype by the end of their courses. So we'll hear about their background at Blizzard and about this really cool game Causal Loop, including their inspiration for the game mechanics, and how they actually pulled this off, including troubleshooting issues and funding their indie game. So let's get to it. So yeah, let's talk about Blizzard first. You know, it's a company that I've known a bit, and I have a very fond collection of memories of my interactions with the leadership at Blizz. So yeah, you guys were at Blizzard in the mid 2Ks or late 2Ks, somewhere around there.
Yeah, well, I joined in 2005. That's when I joined, but we were working based off the French headquarters studio, basically. So there was a lot of us being adjacent to everything that was happening in Irvine, but we were working based out of France. Yeah.
Okay. Were there specific projects you guys were attached to?
All of them.
Oh, okay.
Actually, all of them.
Yeah. Okay. But that was just because of the nature of what we did there, which was quality assurance, localization, that kind of stuff. Okay. And we've always wanted to branch out into development. So, you know, we made a lot of suggestions, sort of trying to tie development and us a little bit closer together, which we succeeded in a couple of instances. For example, we also did tech art at one point because it was related to, you know, voiceover and lip movements and that kind of stuff. And we were onboarding and teaching people in that regard as well, which was really cool because we got to visit the campus several times over. And That's what happened there.
That's super exciting. So, you know, it's interesting. My personal experience has been that some of the best production people I've ever known actually started in QA. And I kind of think it's related to knowing what broken looks like. Yeah. And which gives you some insight into what done looks like. And I think that really matters when you're doing production. Yes. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, that and what broken looks like in relation to how things actually work, I think, is a big factor. Because if you you can do QA, but you don't necessarily have to know how stuff works, but you pick up on it naturally. You know, you know what kind of stuff goes into making a game at one point, and I think that's super important as well.
Yeah, yeah. So the obvious question is, do you feel like that helped you guys get prepared to go off and do your own thing and build your own title? I mean, did that experience and that knowledge kind of give you a launch pad to work from?
That certainly was or played a heavy role in it. Yes. Okay. Especially because on the sidelines, I mean, Kai and I talked a lot because we've kind of found our passion in like doing more than just the basic stuff. Yeah. And then we also like discovered, hey, we're both kind of into game development actually. Mm-hmm. And that's when we got started. And at some point we did more. I mean, more as a hobby on the sidelines, but
we did a lot of game jams as well. And what we also did was internally at Blizzard to onboard people into QA is a huge example that we were creating levels for games, for our games that were, you know, broken on purpose. so we can gauge, you know, whether or not people would pick up on that. And that was actually a big hit.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was. In fact, I've used similar techniques when I'm teaching people how to design. One of the things I like to teach them is what to do when they try to build something and it isn't behaving correctly. Because if you're a designer, if you're a creative, often you don't get exposed to the practical side of, well, if I try to do this and it doesn't work, what do I do? I think there's a lot of value in having some idea of how to find a path through that. And clearly that's benefited you guys. So I want to talk about Causal Loop. And first I have to compliment you guys on that name, because in my estimation, it's an awesome title. It really is. I mean, you don't get a lot of those. And if you go through Steam, and I spend a lot of time on Steam for a lot of different reasons, there are a lot of titles that are kind of descriptive, but kind of bland. Mm-mm. And the thing I find interesting about Causal Loop is that it implies so many interesting things. Yeah. And those appear to be sort of thematically tied to what the game actually is. So could you guys give me the elevator pitch for Causal Loop? Because I think that's something people would love to hear.
Well, the elevator pitch is actually fairly simple for what you can actually do in the game. It's what do you think happens if you create echoes of your past actions to help you in the here and now? That's pretty much the elevator pitch. Of course, it branches out from there, and I can go into way more detail.
Yeah. Oh, we'll drill down on that. I'm actually super interested.
We're actually using the word branching a lot, which makes sense in the context of what we're doing. But that's the pitch.
It's not. My impression is that it's not fixed, as in I get to a certain point in time, and then I can make a decision that will sort of retroactively affect what I'm doing. It's completely
woven into the actual puzzle gameplay. So that was one of the main ideas that we had, was to make sure that when a player makes a choice, an actual conscious choice, which is not like A or B or C, it's all of the choices that you make during solving your puzzle combined, is that it actually matters in relation to the puzzle. And that works really well, because you can see the choices that you've made because you've recorded yourself doing them, right? So what that leads to then is that you, while creating your echoes, you have to think into the past, into the future, and into the present that you are in right now at the same time. Because you also retroactively might need to change a path, which could lead to the collapse of other paths, of course. That's the huge desynchronization topic that we have, which was a really, really problematic thing to get to work.
I guess we'll get into that later, yeah.
But it's working now.
But to be fair, though, it's not as complicated as Kai made it sound. Well, in terms of gameplay.
Yeah, but I mean, it can be. It can be when you don't, especially at the beginning of the game, when you don't know how to use your abilities right. Then in a lot of instances, we had this situation where you're just standing around, or where we observed players standing around and they didn't know what they did wrong, which was also a huge problem that we needed to solve, like conveyance and telegraphing stuff. But we think we're where we need to be there as well now.
That's exciting. So one of the things that seems apparent about your game is that it's not focused on kind of the usual tropes, which largely resolve to combat, right? It's like, I'm going to go fight something and I'll feel great about it because I'll win and I'll find interesting things. And you're not doing that at all.
No,
and
we had some, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and yet there seems to be a lot of action and a lot of variability in outcomes that I've worked with people who've tried to come up with sort of alternatives to combat as gameplay. And it's a lot harder to do than people realize. Yeah. And yet you guys seem to have accomplished it. So could you maybe talk a little bit about your approach to the gameplay? I mean, how did you get down this road, and how did you find your way?
It was actually, it was a natural progression, but like you said, like there's a lot of problems that were put in front of us, like especially the ones where you said, like what you just said about the action part and feeling like you are actually living through something that is action-y, right? So it's all, I'd say 90% of what you're feeling there is a thematic approach. You know, it's the fact that we're ramping up the music when you're branching an echo, even though nothing is really happening, but you're recording yourself doing something. But that helped a lot in making it feel like there's
the feeling,
making it feel like there's stakes, and there is stakes, even literally, because we also tie that into the narrative. Like when an echo gets deleted, it isn't just deleted, it dies, you know, and we count every single echo that dies in the background. But it's these tiny things that make it feel more action-y than it actually is. And we had, interestingly enough, discussions with potential partners already that have been asking us, why can I not shoot stuff? Why is there not a perk system, right? And we had to explain
where are
it
the
to
RPG
them.
elements and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, literally, and then you already know, and then you already know that you're talking to the wrong person here. But we've asked this person, how would you add a perk system, for example? And then they would answer with something like, it would be great, like if I could upgrade my jump distance. And I said, yeah, well, that breaks the entire game right away. Right. And it's not just that, it's all of the things that we've explored this. It's all of the things that would just break everything. If you can select different things and you can circumvent puzzles quicker and faster, it's a lot harder to balance this kind of stuff in that case.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. There is still kind of this lurking desire in the biz for kind of traditional tropes of progression. And that's not really surprising because it is appealing, right? I mean, human beings like to follow those paths. It's pleasing. You get these little rewards along the way. All that stuff makes sense. But it isn't the only way to interact with a game, obviously. I mean, clearly you guys already know that. I don't have to lecture you on that. It's interesting to me that there seems to be a little bit of a trend away from that stuff. And even in games that still contain kind of traditional progression systems, there's this kind of drift of emphasis to player skill as opposed to just making a number better. And I actually think that the guys at FromSoft kind of led that shift. Sure. They sort of helped induce it, and they started driving towards skill as opposed to numbers. I mean, there's still lots of numbers in their games, but player skill has this massive impact on the experience. And I'm not really suggesting that you guys are making a Souls-like, because clearly you're not. But there is this emphasis on player skill that I personally find really appealing. I mean, it kind of reminds me of my early days in the game biz, when player skill was kind of what it was about. And just dialing up numbers wasn't really part of the experience. So that actually brings me to something I'm really interested in. And I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but at the same time, I kind of do. When I looked at your game, the first thing that popped into my head was Portal. And I mean that as a compliment. And I want to talk about that. And then I thought of Life is Strange. And I also mean that as a compliment. And then I thought of Myst. And the Myst part had more to do with, wow, that looks amazing. Oh, wow, that looks amazing too. So
okay,
I kind of wanted to kind of poke at that a little bit. I mean, were there inspirations that started you down this path that helped you kind of formulate your thinking about it?
Definitely.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, Portal, of course, is one thing in terms of, okay, how should we structure puzzles inside these bigger levels? But we just didn't want to make simple puzzle rooms like Portal does all the time. Right. Because you go from room to room to room to room. And I mean, technically they're all different, but essentially they're the same, at least visually. Right.
Yeah, it's that huge question that I asked myself at the beginning was how would Portal look like without portals? Right. So Portal was definitely an inspiration because I also designed Portal maps just for fun, here and there, just, uploading them to the community, got good feedback. And I was like, we could make this so much cooler if we actually didn't have any portals. And friends of mine, they said, the hell are you talking about? That's not going to work. Of course it's not going to work, but you need to start somewhere, right? So the systemic approach that Portal does with its, systems design, buttons, bridges, all of these things, that we've taken all of that. We've expanded on some of these ideas. Like we have force fields that aren't actually force fields. That's a good example for that. Because our force fields are not stopping you, the player, but they're stopping your echoes. And that was a huge twist that we could have seen, like all of the stuff coming out of this one. It was pretty big. But then like adjacent to that, like how do we explain this new concept of what a force field is to the players? Because it's not that obvious from the get-go.
We ran into some, let's call it issues with early playtesters.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, let's put it that way, the force field had an actual visible force field. And players were actually super hesitant to even try to cross that.
Yep.
Right, because they've been taught not to.
Yeah,
right?
They were standing in front of it like it was a wall, and they didn't even touch it, So, and we have changes and shifts to all of Portal systems like that to the systems that we've implemented. And what you also said was Life is Strange. So, the narrative approach, of course, it's, I think, one of the biggest factors when we're talking about how we structure narrative for Causal Loop is we wanted to get away from, and this loops back to Portal a little bit, from this whimsical approach, of telling a story, because it's super tempting to, like, when you're locked into an area or a room where you just have to solve puzzles, to explain that away with whimsy, right? It's we make you do it because we're testing you. It's I'm not ripping on Portal in that regard, but it works absolutely phenomenally well with Portal. But for what we wanted to do, we wanted to have something more introspective, We wanted to have this classical sci-fi, like think Interstellar, and you're pretty much there. So that's what we wanted, and that put us into a situation where I actually had to come up with a narrative solution for that. That ultimately led us to tie the actual gameplay mechanics and what you're doing all the time in Causal Loop to the narrative so strongly that they're inseparable now.
Which is, in my opinion, how it should be, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
that when you get those resonances, that's when it matters. That's when it pulls you through.
Right.
My early experience with Halo when it was still under development was with a little bit like that. Part of what kept me going through the levels in Halo was I wanted to know what was going to happen next. And I'm already feeling that with this. And in fact, I gotta say, you guys, at the end of that teaser trailer, what an awesome line. I won't telegraph it. We'll cut it in and show it to people. But it's a great line, and I think it kind of speaks to what you're saying about the storytelling.
Exactly.
That it's not goofy, it's not whimsical. It's got a different vibe, and that vibe feels really good.
Bale, you can't give up now. We've come too far.
How did we end up here, Walter? What choices brought us to this point?
We knew it wouldn't be easy. Every decision, every risk. It all led us here for a reason.
I'm the creator. I'm driven by this constant urge. I'm the equator. I will no longer be submerged.
I keep replaying it all in my head. If only I had seen the signs earlier, maybe...
Maybe nothing. We can't change the past. But we can still shape what lies ahead. And we're good at that, Bale. It's what we do.
You're right, Walter. You're right, Walter. It is kind of our specialty.
I'm very eager to see the rest of the story.
I mean, it can be goofy at times, but then it's more like intentional.
Right.
Yeah, we're doing that too. Like we're doing that too to lighten the situation and stuff like that. We have like apart from the echoes that you can create, there's also millions of echoes around, roaming around the game world, and they're communicating with you sometimes, and you can basically look into what would have happened if I would have taken a different approach to things. And one of them, for example, is completely insane because he's like a hermit and he's living on the planet and he gave up on solving the puzzles, and he's hunting trilobites now as a hobby to eat, and he's completely insane and he's talking to you all the time, right, while you're solving a puzzle. It's really cool, but then you also reach that point where you say, this is awesome as hell, but we need to stop doing that now because we need to get back to the actual story.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to experience the story for myself. I mean, it's something I'm really looking forward to. So can we talk a little bit more about your systems approach to gameplay? And when I look at what I've seen so far, I see kind of 4 pieces to what I think comprise the key elements of gameplay in Causal Loop. There's traversal, i.e. getting around. There's logic, as in, how do I do this? Or how do I get through this? Or what do I do? There's timing, which I actually think is really important to make this a more interesting experience. And then there's narrative. And as you point out, those things are tied together. But have I got that about right? That is the spread of the experience? Okay.
That's basically our pillars. That's the pillars. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you guys systematize that? I mean, I've seen the playground, and we're going to show some of that in this cast. It's super cool. But how did you get to that? I mean, was it sort of an incremental process, or did you have sort of the big idea and follow that path? How did you get there?
This was actually fully incremental. I mean, we really started very small. We basically, or when Kai started the project, he basically had like a button, a bridge, a force field, or what was supposed to be a force field, and then a thing which we call a key.
Yep.
Which is more like an energy device that you put into a socket, and then energy gets transferred.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where we started from. And
that's the main elements, and that was even before the branching worked, like the main mechanic. And I remember asking Daniel, can we do this? So I asked him because I have no idea. Can we do this? And he flat out said no. He said it's impossible. But if you know Daniel and how he works, it's like it's his way of saying challenge accepted, right? Yeah. And then a couple of maybe a week later, he came back to me and said, not even. He came back to me and said,
3 days or so.
Download the latest update. I did that, and then we had like all of a sudden I had the ability to record my movement, and it spawned this debug path that I was walking on previously, and it had like these little debug spheres on it, and that's when I knew we can do it. We can actually do this because the rest is just logistics at this point.
Right.
And
of course, it's not that easy, but
of course not,
because everything needs to interact in some way.
Right.
But that's what we had initially, and not much more really. And then we added stuff on top of that, which is like subsystems. We have a power system now. Maybe Daniel can explain a little bit about that.
Oh boy. That's not that easy to explain. Let's just say, I mentioned the key, but this key can have like 5 different states, 5 different power states or power setups, which reaches from like 1 to 5. And all of the systems, we also have like the doors, like the bridges, the buttons, and everything else we can access with the power system is relying on that. So we can like say, okay, this door specifically needs like 2 power. Mm-hmm. So how do I open that door? This can either be a button which provides 2 power, or it can like be 2 buttons which provide from which each comes 1 power. Mm-hmm. And we can apply the same to like keys and the sockets. And
okay,
So
you're
it's a
kind
lot
of
deeper.
layering the mechanic and adding complexity and or depth over time. Which I mean, honestly, guys, it's funny. I mean, I'm going to loop back on your early days in the business. That is so Blizzard. Back in the day, that was how Blizzard did what they did, right? I mean, you would have a mechanic that would appear on, say, an enemy. And then a little later on, it would appear on the enemy with some kind of embellishment. It's like, first it would do a leap, then it would do a leap, and it would do a little bit of an area effect thing, and then it would do a little area effect thing, and then it would do a stun. And then, just kind of keep layering it on, and you have to, as a player, you have to adapt to that. I think it's the way good game systems get designed. This is kind of how it works, right?
It felt like the natural way to design this. To be honest. And I had to force myself because I am prone to falling into that age-old trap of thinking about the story too early, thinking about the music and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, I stuck to, because this was already when we were at CG Spectrum, and we were working with, I was working with Justin Howe, and he was so tremendously helpful in all of this because he kept me on that path. And this is exactly why we wanted to do this at CG. It's because we were trying to find out if we are ready to do this on our own. Because, where we came from, that was a game development environment, sure. But I think one of the biggest problems was that we could not grow naturally into the positions that we wanted to be in. It was just not possible. Yeah.
Actually, I want to come back to that because that's a common theme for people who are starting their own thing, and I really want to come back to it because I think it'll be really interesting to a lot of people. Sort of how that journey worked for you guys. And by the way, I agree. I mean, Justin is very good at asking the right questions at the right time. That's one of his superpowers. So I'm really glad you guys got to work with him. So actually, that kind of brings me to something I wanted to touch on. We talked a little bit about sort of inspirational elements, but was there a moment where you guys said, I want to do this, and this is kind of what I think it's going to be? Or did it just kind of grow organically out of experimentation?
No, there was a definitive moment, and it was even before we did the prototype. I was playing around with the idea for a while, and we already were planning to do our CG courses. But I said, if we do this, if we do the courses there, why not just use that time efficiently and just, basically create something there with the help of them that we can then probably maybe use and develop into something else. So that's where all of that came from at the beginning. I had no idea about the story. I had no ideas about anything. The only thing that we really knew at the beginning was that we wanted to be able to have like a Portal-like puzzler with that specific branching main mechanic, the echo thing. That's
it's
all we knew.
The two ways I've seen great concepts emerge are either bottom up or top down, and almost always it's one or the other, right? So you'll start with, I think doing this might be interesting, or you start with, I've got this big idea. It's not even a big idea. It's like I've got a thematic element or an ethos or something like that I really feel strongly about. I really want to do something about dinosaurs, and I'm going to do something about dinosaurs. I don't know what the hell it is, right? And then the other end of it is, if you did it this thing in this way, that would be super cool. And then you kind of conceive reasons for that to occur. And it sounds like that's how you guys started. Is that kind of right?
Yeah. There is this one element that I had in my head, even when we started the prototype, and that was just barren, rocky landscapes and a spaceship. That's it. Like I even did an Unreal 4 demo of the scene, basically on how I think or how I envision this. And it's still, maybe I can send it over. I still have it somewhere. But,
I'd love to see it, man.
Sure. It's, I composed a little bit of soundtrack for that. I animated the ship, everything. But then that is like the top layer where everything branched down from.
I think his biggest inspiration at that point was like, I want something that's very Icelandic.
Yeah, okay. Iceland was a huge inspiration.
Just went from there, and I was already being in awe because it already looked awesome with what he has done there. So
yeah, it's interesting. There are really important emotional inspirations that kind of emerge from stuff like that. And it's not like you really know where it's taking you. It's more like just that it's awesome, right? It makes me feel energized when I see it. And it sounds like there was a bit of that going on there.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think one of the biggest things is, like, in my opinion, when writing a story and when doing these thematic approaches, you just have to pour a little bit of yourself into everything and the state of mind that you are currently in. I mean, we were in I don't want to say dire situation, but we were not in a good spot when all of that started, because the French office, the French Blizzard office, was just dissolved. We didn't know what are we gonna do. Like, I felt lonely, I felt isolated, and that all of that went into that concept, that animated concept art that I did there. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe we can just channel this feeling into something here. Yeah.
Well, it seems to have worked. I'm just saying. So actually, this brings me to something I'm very curious about. Actually, two things I want to ask. First, every production I've ever been involved in, at some point, there's that moment of, that's a problem. So has that happened to you guys? And
several times.
Is there one you're willing to talk about? Because I think it's helpful for people to understand that A, that happens, and B, you can get past it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, specifically for Causal Loop, I don't think we had any catastrophic occurrences of that. But
I'd say the desynchronous, the sync issues we had. Like, I was genuinely worried for a good while there. Because what you need to know about how the game actually works is, and how it's a gameplay feature that your echoes can desync. We've talked about that earlier. But what happens if they don't, and when they should, and what happens if they do when they shouldn't? Gonna give you a quick example here. If you're branching an echo through a teleporter, and then that action gets repeated, right? Your echo is running onto that same teleporter, and it's going to teleport itself away. And it's going to do on the other side of that wherever it ends up, it's going to do whatever you did before. But sometimes, not always, in some early versions of the build, it just didn't make it through. It went onto the teleporter and was desynced, and you got your systems message that didn't work, right? And we're really struggling to find out, at least, why that's happening and how that's happening. And I am a very emotional person when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I was genuinely worried for a good couple of days until, like, we had measures in place to make sure that your echoes always repeat what you're doing. And we, by the way, Daniel, we still have instances where that's happening. I'm going to show you. But I don't think
not that easy.
I don't think it's a huge problem anymore, right? In 99% of the cases right now, it's working. Or here's another cool one, and I think you'll appreciate that, Scott. We have different sets of terminals in the game, switches, right? For example, we have a timing switch, it's a timed button. Basically, you press it and it ticks for 5 seconds and then it reverts its state. But we also have a flip switch. So that can have one of two states. It's state 1 and state 2. So what happens now if you branch an echo to that switch, you flip the switch and the echo starts repeating its actions? Does the switch go back into its initial position?
Or does it keep the state? Right.
Or does it keep the state and flip that state? Oh God, that was such... Yeah. But this this is one of the cases where we just had to make a hard call because it was just too complicated for players to keep that in mind while branching their echoes. So what we do now is when you're done recording your echo and when you snap back to your initial position, we switch that switch back into the position where it was. It doesn't make any logical sense why that would happen, but
at least if there is some concern about the timing with the switch, or that the player would be too confused, especially when it's linked to like another system, like for example the force field or a bridge that suddenly gets switched the other way around and you don't understand why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it's really interesting. I've been doing games for a long time, and one of the things that I've seen many times is that in some cases you effectively have to cheat on the player's behalf. Yeah. Because if you don't, bad things will happen. And while it may not be logical to do so, you actually kind of have to, because it's too confusing or it's too hard to manipulate. Actually, when I was running Flight Simulator, we had this problem with view angle and the distortions caused by that view angle. And, you know, if you're doing a flight game, you want to be able to see as much stuff as possible. So you know, the view angle, widening the view angle, there's a lot of good reasons to do that. But the problem is,
it makes it hard with distances, right?
Stuff in the middle of the screen gets really small. Mm-hmm. So what do you do? Because now you're playing dot wars, right? You've got like this little tiny speck out in front of you someplace, and you're like, I don't even know what that is. So what we did is we built a system that would scale objects as they neared the center of the view frustum.
Oh, really? Like the actual object?
You would actually scale the object, so as it got toward the edge of the view frustum, it would go back closer to its actual scale, and in the middle, we would scale it up. I think it was like 2.5x.
That's ingenious.
And you couldn't tell.
That's good.
Nobody noticed, but we were cheating, right?
I would have thought about this from like a lens angle. Like, can we somehow use maybe, I mean, back in the day that wasn't a thing, but VR technology is doing a lot of things in these days where they correct for problems like this. But that's the angle that I would take today, I guess.
I mean, essentially we're doing something similar with like when you hold the key in your hands as a player, but since you can adjust the FOV, it always needs to be at the same size, so to say. And with the changing FOV, and especially if you turn on like the ultra wide mode, in which it gets even smaller or closer to the player, so I kind of need to readjust this,
right,
more or less manually.
Yeah, we're readjusting the position. Yeah, sort of. Yeah. And there's other solutions to that as well. For example, like render all the carryables or your hands in a different camera and stuff like that. But we wanted it to be FOV perfect. Like we wanted it to be in the actual game world at all times, just because of the lighting, because of all the things that you can think of.
Right. That's super interesting stuff. And it's part of what has kept me interested in game development for as long as it has, because solving those problems is actually kind of exciting in its own weird way. So do you mind if I ask you guys, and I may be getting a little too personal here, but it is something that I think is of great interest to people who aspire to do what you're doing. And that comes down to funding. Yeah. And I'm curious about how you guys dealt with that. In getting Causal Loop put together. I mean, did you seek funding somehow, or how did you get it done?
Yeah, it was a huge problem. I mean, it was a huge uncertainty factor too, because we had no idea if other people would like our idea and be ready to, put money in it. But we took a couple of steps at the beginning. For example, we massively reduced our cost of living by moving back to Germany from France into the middle of nowhere, as we said. We made sure that we can live as cheaply as possible. And then obviously we were trying for funding, sure. And we have federal funding opportunities here in Germany. And I think we got funded, or at least, to a degree where we can say, okay, we can live comfortably now. I mean, not taking the money for ourselves, but making sure that all of the features that we want to see in Causal Loop that would make the game even better are covered, right? And then I'm talking about things like soundtrack here. I'm talking about things like external contractors, 3D artists, 2D artists. That kind of stuff is covered, which is it's great to know. It makes you sleep a lot better.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things I personally find compelling about working in the European area is that there are a number of countries that do some kind of support of the arts.
Yep.
And games are kind of finding their way into that ecosystem. And I think that's actually really good. I mean, I advise a team in Spain.
It is, but it's also not
doing
easy.
the same thing. No, it's hard.
They don't have a lot of money, mind you. So there's a committee, right? Mm-hmm. And whatever you put in front of them will be heavily scrutinized. Right. But that also, when it went through and we got the call, you got it, that also gave us...
That must have been quite a day.
That was a great day, yeah. Gave us a good confidence boost as well, because we knew, okay, we got something, we got something here.
So when you were pitching, did you guys have some kind of build that started to convey some of the important things about Causal Loop so that they could understand what it was you were trying to do? I mean, how did you formulate your pitch?
Daniel.
I mean, to be fair, we've been at this for like more than 2.5 years now. So essentially we're like in the middle of production. Yep. So
we had
a lot of stuff to show already, which helped a lot.
We did show a lot of stuff while playing ourselves. We live streamed this stuff. We also sent out builds here and there. But the biggest problem that we have, and maybe we can have a talk about this on a separate occasion, but it's a huge problem, is the progression curve, right? Because you cannot just drop anybody in front of this game and expect them to have a good time, especially, with vertical slice levels, because the vertical slice that we have that we know is complete and really good and well done is level 10, right? So
that's a long way in, man.
Yeah, nobody, like we're going to be having like 15 or 16 levels. I'm not sure at this point because it changes, but the biggest problem with that is, like, you would need to create a dedicated demo with pop-ups and stuff to explain everything, which also detracts from the actual experience a lot. But then when I just drop you into level 2, which is also very far and also looks very good, there's not enough going on because you're still learning, and you are branching like 2 echoes in that level, and it's one echo. Yeah, but after another is what I mean. Yep. So that's a problem. So it's not easy to convey what the game can actually do for you as a player to somebody who's never played it before.
Right. It's interesting. I've seen this problem before with games, especially games that are innovative in some way. I think those two facts are kind of connected. If you're doing something sort of unexpected, people don't know how to get their head around it unless you show them. But if you show them, it may confuse them, and you wind up in kind of a weird place. And one of the more successful strategies I've seen is to get face-to-face. That's harder to do for obvious reasons. But sometimes if you can get them in a room and just say, watch me while I do it. In fact, interestingly enough, that's how Valve used to do every single presentation they did. And I was at Microsoft at the time, and I was pretty tight with those guys. I got to know them pretty well. And they brought me in one time to show me Half-Life 2 when it was very early. And it was the most tightly controlled demo I have ever seen in my life.
I remember a video that they did. Video that they did. Must have been in, I don't know, super early 1995, or when did Half-Life 2 came out? come out?
Oh, it was
Then it was way later.
I think I met with them in 2000, if I remember. But
I remember. I think it was E3, and I remember them explaining constantly while they were demoing the thing, and that impressed me as well, because I was like, it makes total sense, because there's so many new things to see in this. That you just need to circle with a marker.
You have to kind of guide them through the experience. And so I think it's very hard, especially for small teams, to just kind of throw a build at somebody and expect a positive outcome. That's a tough thing to do.
We're going to be at Gamescom this year as well, and we're intending to do that as well. We're going to take a laptop with us and show that to people, and Yeah.
No, I think it's a good strategy, and I'm really glad to see Gamescom is still Gamescom. There are other shows like E3 that have either gone away or turned into something else, and Gamescom now is kind of the premier gamer-centric experience, and people show up to do business, but it vibes a lot like the old E3 to me, and I'm glad it does.
I mean, it's like a 50-50 thing, right? You have both worlds, but embedded into one venue. But I gotta say, I had to get used to it, because we were at Gamescom last year too, and that was the first time I was at Gamescom as a tradesperson, right? And that was, geez. It's completely different to what you would expect. Like, it was just all these questions like, what's your marketing strategy? I hadn't thought about that. Right? Stuff like that. Yeah. So
it's interesting. So you guys are actually looking to find the right publishing partner right now, right?
Yeah.
So this actually speaks to something that I'm gonna do a podcast about this next week. There's this shift going on in the industry, and I'm sure you guys are feeling it, even if you're not really paying attention to it. Back in the day, most game development was effectively sharecropping. So a publisher would say, here's some money, you can make your game, and I'm going to take most of your crop, and I'm going to give you a little bit back, and you got to burn down what I spent getting you there. Before you actually see any more money. And I understand why that model existed, but it's very different now, because guys like you can find a way, and the technology and the ecosystems, they've evolved so much, and digital distribution has changed things. I mean, it really has changed things. Could you guys publish yourselves? Yes, you could. Do you want to? Maybe not, because there are talents and bodies of expertise that you may not have or even want to have. And I think that's where a publisher can be valuable to you. So how do you guys think about your place in the business ecosystem that you're trying to occupy? I mean, are you going to focus entirely on just being creative and technical and making the thing? Is that what you want to do?
I believe that's what we want to do. And I mean, it's no mystery to you that Causal Loop is a niche project, right? But that niche, that specific niche of first-person puzzle, maybe even throw in sci-fi and adventure and all of these things, hasn't been served for quite a while now. I think the last title, or the last big title, which, in AAA perspective wasn't even big, would be the Talos Principle 2, right? Something like that. But it's being ignored, and I feel like that's good for us, because we can offer something like that with a really tiny team. That's sort of how we position ourselves within all of this, and
Well, I would argue that, yes, you're right, it is a niche, but I would argue that it's a fairly high density niche. And what I mean by that is that a high density niche, the people who are fans of whatever that is tend to buy what's offered in that space. And you'll see that in other places, like the simulation fans, right? They don't just buy one thing, they buy like 5 things. And visual novel fans, they don't buy one thing, they buy 5 or 6 things. And I think you guys are kind of in one of those spaces. maybe it's not, you're not going to sell 50 million copies. That's not going to happen. It'd be cool, but
that's completely unnecessary too.
Right. And that's kind of my point. I mean, it is both possible and even desirable to focus on an area where you have the skill and the passion to accomplish something, and also there's a group of people who really want what you're doing, and I think that's going to be true for you guys for sure.
And we've done market research. We've seen Reddit threads. Where's the next game in this space, right? What could I play? And we're like, oh, we got a surprise for you. We can't talk about it yet. Hold on. But yeah, that's the thing, and I think it also shows like. Our mentality in all of this is because we really like to do this kind of stuff, man. Like we really like doing it, and we don't want to like make all the money there is on the entire planet because it's just not necessary. That was an impulse reply to you. Like it's not necessary because it isn't. We can comfortably live if we sell, I don't know, like 100K copies. That's a lot already for us.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the endless ironies of doing creative is that the moment you chase money, you're probably going to miss the target almost invariably. Right? I mean, yes, you can be very successful, and yes, you can make a living at it, and yes, those things are all true. But if your primary objective is making money, you end up with NFTs, and nobody wants to do business with you.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And we've been asked that question, like, what's your monetization strategy? And I'm like, what do you mean? Do you mean what I think you mean? Because then we're done.
Yeah. So it's actually very simple. It's like I make the thing, people give me money, and then they get to play it, and they have an awesome time.
And they get to keep it, Right. We're not going to turn it off.
Right. They're not borrowing it for a while. Yeah. So yay you. That's awesome. So I want to ask really quickly about how you guys, I mean, you're a tiny team, right? I mean, just a couple of people, but how do you guys divvy up the work? I mean, do you have, it sounds like Daniel, you're mostly the technical guy. Is that true?
That is about right, yeah. I mean, I usually do the pre-visuals for all the levels, the puzzle design in there.
The white boxing is doing that,
the white boxing, especially.
And he's very programmatic about that too. It's all on the grid,
That's awesome.
But it's sort of a requirement.
Essentially, you wanted it on the grid at some point.
Yeah.
Because when I started, I tried to not do everything on the grid.
Yeah.
And in the end, that caused more problems than actually doing it. So
because we are, gameplay wise and systems wise, we are very grid dependent. And then I was like, and even the intro areas and outro areas and story areas, just do them on the grid. I'm going to come up with something here. But he's doing that. I'm doing basically Daniel's doing everything that works, and I do everything that you can hear and see.
That's awesome. Are you doing the writing too, Kai?
Yeah.
No?
That's
nice
me.
Work. Nice work.
Thank you.
No, it's interesting. I mean, this happens a lot with founders, right? I mean, you have to, because you don't have a bunch of people you can delegate
and
to.
You have to get good at this stuff quick.
You do. Yeah. But it's also what I think creates kind of a cohesion of effort. And it's interesting, when I talked to Morhaime about this a long time ago, and one of the things he said that really stuck with me is that they had this little group of guys who were kind of the nucleus of the original Blizzard way back when they were playing Warhammer 40K on the floor in their office and stuff like that. And
Synapse and whatever they were called back then.
Silicon and Synapse.
Silicon and Synapse.
It was way back. And they got to a place where they all kind of knew how to do that. And one of the challenges that they had forever was, how do we get anybody else into this group? Because we don't know how to do that. We don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good one.
And I suspect
the thing.
That's the curse of the indies, right? I mean, that is one of the problems you always have to deal with. And you figure it out over time, right? I mean, eventually you find ways to, with lower effort, get the information that they need so that they can do what they do. But
I'm having this
time.
I'm having this with soundtrack now, because I can do music, but I can't do music coherently. Like I can't internalize thematics a lot. So I can make something sound cool, no problem. I can make it fit a certain situation, but an overarching theme, I am having issues with. So we're reaching out to composers at this point, and they're asking so many questions. I'm like, dude, I have no idea. Right? Send me something, and then they send you something, and you're like, yeah.
No, not like that. Yeah.
But I don't want to be an ass either, So
yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, difficult. I haven't found a magic solution to that. I mean, I've had the same problem, right? And when I was working at Everything or Nothing, I was dealing with a very well-known composer who was very eager to do the job, and it took us a month just to figure out how to talk to each other.
God.
It wasn't for lack of trying. It was just difficult to bridge that gap, especially if you're dealing with somebody who hasn't done games before. Now, you may not be in that situation, but the way you think about sound for a game is not the way you think about sound for a film. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Right. I've had these conversations as well. Yeah.
And again, you sort of find a way, you muddle through, but it's not simple, and it's not obvious sometimes what actually needs to happen. One time I had a writer call me up, very skilled, very well-known scriptwriter. He called me up and said, I am 200 pages into this thing, and I'm not even close to being done. What do I do? I'm like, well, dude, you're writing for a game. This is the deal. Because he was used to writing, 80 pages, right? And I'm done, right? Yeah. Turn it in, and I get my money. And that's not how games work. Right?
No, no. Games work like this. Like you write your outline for a level or the entire story or whatever, and then you have that. Like in my case, the level outline. I'm doing it like that. We have this overarching story. We know what's going to happen at which point in the game, but then I just go into a level. I look at all the spots, and we also pre-plan stuff, and then I write dialogue for that. Yeah. But then in some of these circumstances, I'm like, okay, we have 30 lines of dialogue here and 30 lines of dialogue here and 30 lines of dialogue here, and we're saying absolutely nothing. We're communicating nothing to the player that is that counts, and that brings or moves the story forward. So I remove 30. I add 30 new ones, and it's a living document, and it's a beast. And I already have a list of so many things that I want to change retroactively. Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah. Have you written in other media? So do you have a basis for comparison?
I have it, but it's all self-taught. Taught.
Okay.
It's all self-taught. It's what I did before was, for example, audio plays. It's a huge thing in Germany. Did write for a lot of audio plays, also produced them, used my Christmas money for that kind of stuff, right?
That's awesome.
Hire voice actors, because I just like stories, specifically sci-fi stories. And we were exposed to that at Blizzard as well. We were working with a lot of scripts. We were doing voiceover recordings in the studios, all of that. So I knew what I was getting myself into, sort of. But, to go from like 40 lines of dialogue per level to what's now 120 or 130 per level, it's daunting, right?
Yeah,
and at least on the current levels. Not on all of them.
Not on all of them, but
for now. But
wait until my rework comes in.
Yeah. Oh, well. So then your experience at Blizz actually helped prepare you.
Oh yeah, definitely
for doing this, because I have to say your dialogue is good. It's well above the usual fare, especially in indies. And I'm not bagging on anybody, but a lot of people who are kind of new to it don't really know how to structure dialogue for that application, and clearly you do. I mean,
it's a feeling mostly. It's a feeling based on what we know from other games as well. Right. Like we're not flat out copying, but we also know, like if I could, I would go all in and just, have people talk all the time, but I can't, because you need to be able to have players concentrate on their tasks. Players need to be rewarded with dialogue. Players need to be led into new areas with dialogue. So we're using it as a system almost, right?
Yeah. I think that's when it works, right? I mean, it needs to be integrated into the rest of the systems that the game relies on. And yes, I mean, I think inevitably dialogue is a vehicle for conveying story in games that is really different from the way it gets used in other media. It's inevitable that that's going to be true, but it produces a really pleasing result. And when that dialogue works well, you don't need a lot of exposition. They'll figure it out. They'll come with you. And in fact, you don't want a lot of exposition.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money, and frankly, they aren't that interested, right? I mean, they may love that shot the first time they see it, but the 26th time they see it, they're like,
That's for example, one issue I had with the Teller's Principle 2. I don't want to bash on the game because it is an awesome game, but the dialogue that's constantly running in the background, which usually has nothing to do with the puzzles or what's actually going on. It's just distracting and doesn't fit, in my opinion.
No,
we're trying to avoid.
Have to agree. Yeah.
We're trying to avoid flooding the player's senses all the time because it's difficult enough to concentrate on the 3 echo branches that you're doing, and then if you're giving a background story, which is interesting. Because we are actually adding all of these little bits into the game as well, or we already have. Like, that's what we use the scanner system for. So if you want to know background details to background elements, you can just use your scanner and try to translate texts, for example, or that kind of stuff. Which might lead you to a couple of red herrings as well. I hate red herrings, don't get me wrong, but sometimes they're necessary.
The occasional dead end is fine,
Yeah.
That lends a certain degree of unexpectedness. No, that's fine. So listen, guys, I know I've kept you for a really long time, and I got a couple of things I just want to poke at really quickly.
Sure.
So how did you guys come to CG Spectrum? I mean, how did that happen?
Daniel.
I mean, that was more like on you, Kai, because you had the idea. And I was like, sure, why not? And
we'll tag along. I mean,
essentially, we went like to the website and what courses do they offer? Because when the office was closed in France, we were like looking for what can we do to like learn something more about game development.
Okay, so you're looking for a pathway to follow.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a way.
Kai was actually looking to go more into depth for game design, while I was looking to get some more experience in game programming. And it
was just a way to make sure that we're ready to do this. Because I asked him, I said, the Blizzard thing is clearly over. What are we going to do next? Like, we could just go our separate ways, but we could also do what we've always talked about doing, go into business for ourselves, make video games, because that's what we want to do. And then he said, yes, right? And I said, but you think we're ready? So there's probably a lot of stuff that we just don't know anything about yet, and we should probably tackle that. And that's how we ended up at CG Spectrum.
You're never ready. No matter how ready you think you are.
But especially working with Justin on my end opened my eyes to so many of the things that I haven't even thought about thinking about. I think he would appreciate that specific way of describing it. Thinking about it, because it's insanely in depth. So many problems that were in front of me that I didn't even recognize as them being problems. And he said, when you realize they're problems during development of the game, then it's too late.
Right.
And he was right.
Yeah.
CG Spectrum prepared us well. Really, I 100% feel that way.
Well, that's actually great to hear. And I mean, part of the reason I joined CG Spectrum is because of that. Right. I mean, I've been around the business for a long time. I actually thought I was going to retire. And then I got a phone call hey, do you feel like mentoring? I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And hijinks ensued. But it led me to realize that there is an opportunity to take all that experience and turn it into kind of shortcutting, hitting the wall a few times for people who are trying to get started. And I can't tell you how exciting that is for me personally to see that happen and to see how far you guys have gone, you know, with whatever springboard we were able to offer. That's just huge. You know, I think you guys have built something extraordinary. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it. I would be nice and I would just kind of talk around it. But I actually think you guys have got something here that is deserving of recognition. So I want to do everything I can to get the word out when and as I can. Which reminds me, where should people go looking for Causal Loop now? Is there some kind of presence out there that they can go to?
We've got our website, www.mirebound.com.
Okay.
And we don't have a Steam page yet. We're working on it, but as I said before, like it's we're just 3 people at this point, and it's problematic. But we're going to be eventually getting there. We released the teaser trailer because we wanted to, you know, celebrate the funding that we received, and also, you know, be able to show something. We're working on something. We're not just pretending, right? So, but on our website, on our socials, we should be pretty much everywhere except for, like, I think Twitter right now, but we're going to be there soon as well. Okay. We're updating whenever we get the chance to update something. Also, our Discord channel, which is pretty cool because you can actually watch us work there. We have a channel where we have a channel where you can sort of lurk. Like, it's not a live stream, but we update a thread consistently, or we talk to each other there as well, and on how to solve different problems.
Can people find your Discord through your website?
The website, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, we'll get the word out. Well, listen,
sure.
Kai, Daniel, thank you so much for the time. I mean, this has actually been super fun.
Thank you.
I hope we get to have an extended version of this conversation at some time in the future. And looking forward to seeing what happens next. Get that Steam page up, man, because I'm going to wish list this thing.
Yeah, we're on it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the CG Spectrum podcast. It's really cool to see this incredible work come out of Kai and Daniel's CG Spectrum studies. And we're looking forward to following their successes, and we'll keep you guys updated. If you liked this episode, give us a follow, like, or subscribe to our channel. There's more of this coming your way.